There are services sitting in your cruise ship supply closets right now, already paid for. All of das. Das already built of das. Not because they're sweet-only perks, but because nobody told them to ask. After more than 20 years of cruising, I've seen this play out on ship after ship. Passengers who could have slept through the night, gotten off the tender in the first group, kept their medication properly cold, they just didn't know the service existed. And the cruise line wasn't going to volunteer it. Not because they're hiding it exactly, it's more that these services are staffed based on projected demand. If only 10 or 12% of passengers ever request a mattress topper, they only need to stock for that. The moment everyone knows and everyone asks, it becomes a serious cost center. So they make it available, they just don't advertise it. And that gap between what's available and what passengers actually know to ask for is what this video is about. I'm going to walk you through 10 free services that are built into your cruise fare and accessible to any passenger, but only if you know they exist, and in most cases, only if you ask within the first 24 hours. A few of these are time sensitive. Some disappear by day 2 if the ship is full, and several of them depend entirely on how you phrase the request because the words you use matter more than most people realize. We're going to start with the practical comfort ones, then move into the territory that most passengers never even think to ask about. The ones toward the end are the ones that made the biggest difference for the people I've seen use them. So stay with me, because the last 2 on this list are the ones I'd never skip. If this kind of thing is useful to you, go ahead and tap the thumbs up, it really does help. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. Let's get into it. Number 1. Complimentary pressing. You packed your formal night outfit in a carry-on. It's been sitting folded for 2 days. You're looking at $8 per item in the cruise planner and you're wondering if it's worth it. Here's what most passengers don't know. Most mainstream and premium lines offer a limited number of complimentary pressing requests per passenger, usually somewhere between 1 and 3 items for the entire cruise. It is not advertised, because it's managed on a first-come basis. If it runs out, they'd rather upsell you to the paid service. Call your cabin steward within the first 24 hours and say this exactly: "I'd like to request complimentary pressing if it's still available for this sailing." Not, "Do you offer free pressing?" That phrasing invites a no. State it as a known service you're requesting access to. On premium lines, Celebrity, Holland, America, Princess, this is more commonly available than on the mainstream mass market ships. If you're sailing during peak season on a fully booked ship, it may already be claimed by the time you board, but if you ask early, you have a real shot. Number 2, the mattress topper and bedding upgrade. For those of us who've been cruising for years, we know that cruise ship mattresses vary enormously. Some are fine. Some feel like plywood with a thin cover on top. If you have a bad back, and a lot of us do 7 nights on the wrong mattress, can turn a good cruise into an uncomfortable one. Cruise lines keep a limited stock of mattress toppers, memory foam pillows, hypoallergenic pillows, and down alternative bedding. It's stored in housekeeping supply closets and distributed on request. Once it's gone for that sailing. I've seen passengers who waited until day 3 ask and come up empty. The people who asked within the first hour of boarding were the ones who got it. Find your cabin steward as early as possible on embarkation day and say, "I'd like to request a mattress topper and an extra firm pillow if they're available." If you have allergies, add, "I also need hypoallergenic bedding due to a sensitivity." It won't transform your cabin into a 4-star hotel. But if your back is what keeps you from sleeping and enjoying the rest of your day, 20 minutes of asking is worth it. Number 3, daily ice delivery. This one sounds small. It isn't. Whether you're keeping medication cool, you just prefer cold water throughout the day, or you're making multiple trips down the hall to the ice machine every afternoon, this is a service most passengers don't know to ask for. Most cabin stewards will deliver a bucket of ice to your cabin once or twice a day if you ask on embarkation day. It's not a published service, but it falls under their discretionary offerings, especially for passengers with medical needs or dietary restrictions. Tell your steward, "I keep medication that needs to stay cool. Would it be possible to have ice delivered once a day?" If it's preference rather than medical, you can simply say, "I'd love daily ice service," if that's something you're able to arrange. This one is entirely at the steward's discretion. If they're already managing 18 cabins and everyone has requested something, they may not be able to do it. But in my experience, if you ask politely on day 1 and you're easy to work with, most stewards will say yes. Have you ever asked for something like this and been surprised by the response? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Number 4, secured storage for mobility devices. You brought a walker or a cane. Your cabin is 186 square feet. There's a mobility device parked in the corner, and you're navigating around it every time you move through the room. On most ships, particularly newer builds designed with accessibility in mind, there are designated storage areas on each deck for mobility devices. Your steward can tag your walker or wheelchair and store it in a secured closet when you're in the cabin. When you need it, you call and they bring it back. Ask your steward, is there secured storage available for my walker during the cruise? I'd like to keep it out of the cabin when I'm not using it. This isn't available on every vessel. Some of the older ships simply don't have the infrastructure for it. But on newer Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, Holland America, and Princess ships, built or retrofitted with accessibility standards in mind, this is standard, worth asking on embarkation day. Now, before we go further, those first four are all about comfort. What I'm about to cover gets into territory that most cruisers never even think to ask about. And if you want everything we've covered so far, plus a complete reference for every situation you might run into on a cruise, the fees worth fighting, the upgrades that actually matter, the questions to ask before you ever set foot on the gangway, it's all laid out in the Seasoned Cruisers Complete Pack. The link is in the description, or you can scan the code on your screen right now. Because number 5 is where it starts to get genuinely important, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to use it. Number 5, priority tender boarding. If you've ever stood on deck watching tender boats shuttle passengers ashore while you wait in a line of 300 or 400 people, you know how long that can take. For anyone with a cane, limited mobility, or just a preference for not standing in direct sun for 90 minutes, this matters. Here's the honest truth. Every major cruise line I'm familiar with has a priority tender list for passengers with mobility limitations. It is not automatic. You have to request it in advance. Go to the guest services desk on embarkation day and say, I have mobility limitations and I'd like to be added to the priority tender list for ports that require it. They'll make a note directly in your reservation. When tender ports come up, you'll be called in the first group. The critical part, if you show up at the tender platform on port day and ask for priority, then it's too late. The list is already set. Passengers who request it on day 1 board with the first wave, maybe 15 to 20 people instead of 200, priority doesn't mean instant. You're still tendering with a group, but it's the first group and you're not standing in the sun for an hour and a half. Number 6, complimentary specialty dining for documented milestones. You're celebrating a 50th anniversary or a significant birthday. You've heard the specialty restaurants run somewhere between $40 and $60 per person, and you didn't budget for it. Most passengers assume that's the price. Full stop. Here's what most don't know. Most cruise lines will comp a specialty dining reservation for a documented milestone birthday, anniversary, honeymoon, but the keyword is documented. It has to be in your passenger profile before you board. If you mention it for the first time at the restaurant podium, it's too late. If you didn't add it during booking, go to guest services on embarkation day and say, today is our 50th anniversary. I'd like to request a complimentary specialty dining reservation if that's available as a courtesy. I'll be honest, this one is not guaranteed. I've seen it approved and I've seen it denied. It depends on the line, the ship, how full the restaurants are, and frankly, how the guest services officer is feeling that day. But it gets approved more often than most people realize, especially when the passenger asks with courtesy and a specific. Number 7, luggage assistance into the cabin. Your bags have been delivered and set outside your cabin door. They're 50 pounds each. The porter is gone. Now it's just you, your luggage, and a door frame sill between you and the room. On most ships, if you call your cabin steward or guest services immediately after your luggage is delivered, they will send someone to bring it fully into your cabin and help you lift it onto the luggage rack. It's labor-intensive, which is why it's not advertised. But it's available and there is no charge for it. Call the steward and say, my luggage was just delivered and I need assistance bringing it into the cabin. Is someone available to help? Be specific, be polite, and ask right away. Some stewards will do this without being prompted. Others won't, based on staffing and timing. But no one is going to judge you for asking. For those of us who've been cruising for years, we know that embarkation day is already a long day. There's no reason to start it with a pulled back muscle. Number 8, medical grade refrigeration for medication. The mini fridge in your cabin may go down to around 50 degrees on a good day. If you're traveling with insulin or another medication that requires strict temperature control, typically between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit, that isn't sufficient. And it matters. Ships have medical-grade refrigeration in the medical center, and they will store passenger medications that require strict cold storage. This is not the same as asking your steward to clear the mini fridge. This is pharmaceutical-grade cold storage, and it's available to any passenger who asks. Call the medical center on embarkation day and say, I'm traveling with insulin that requires refrigeration between 36 and 46 degrees. Can I store it in the medical center for the duration of the cruise? They'll ask you to bring it down in a clearly labeled container. You'll need to go to the medical center to retrieve it when you need it. They are not delivering it to your cabin. But if the alternative is your medication losing efficacy, it's absolutely worth the walk. Always check with your doctor before travel about managing any medication that requires temperature control at sea. Have you ever had to navigate medication storage on a cruise and found a solution that worked? Tell me in the comments. For people our age, this is one of those things that can make or break a trip, and I think it helps to hear from people who've actually dealt with it. Number 9, noise enforcement and cabin noise policy. Your cabin is directly below the pool deck. It's 11:30 at night. The music is so loud it sounds like it's coming through your ceiling. Most passengers either suffer in silence or call guest services in frustration without knowing what to actually say. Here's the honest truth. Cruise lines have posted quiet hours and formal noise policies, but most passengers don't know they can request enforcement by referencing those policies directly. Call guest services and say, "I'm in cabin," and give your cabin number. There is excessive noise from the pool deck above me, and it's past posted quiet hours. I'd like to request enforcement. Citing the policy by name rather than just complaining about noise gets a different response. Security will be dispatched to address it. Now, some noise is unavoidable and not a policy violation. If you're below the jogging track at 6 in the morning, that's generally not actionable. But amplified music or large crowds past midnight is a different matter, and you have every right to report it and request that something be done. The passengers who called on night 1 and referenced the noise policy got action. The passengers who suffered for 3 nights and complained on day 4, that outcome was more frustrating for everyone. Number 10, custom meal delivery for medical dietary needs. This is the one I'd never skip mentioning, because it's the one that makes the biggest difference for the most people and almost nobody knows it exists. You're diabetic. You need to eat at specific times. The main dining room closes at 9:30, and the late night options are pizza and burgers. Standard room service is free on most major lines, but here's what goes beyond that. If you have a documented dietary restriction or a medical dietary need, you can request specific meal delivery outside of standard room service hours. The galley will prepare it and send it up, not whatever happens to be available, a meal prepared to your specifications. On embarkation day, go to guest services or the dining desk and say, "I'm diabetic and I need access to specific meals outside of standard dining hours due to my medical condition. Can I arrange late-night meal delivery directly with the galley?" They will coordinate with the executive chef. You'll set it up in advance, not on the fly at midnight. This is not a 15-minute turnaround situation. But if it's set up properly on day 1, with a legitimate medical need and clear communication, the galley will accommodate it. I've seen this work for passengers with diabetes, Crohn's disease, and severe dietary restrictions passengers who, before they knew this existed, spent half of every previous cruise feeling unwell. One woman told me it was the first cruise she'd taken where she felt like herself the whole time. That's 10. And here's the thread that connects all of them. Every single one of these services exists because cruise lines know that certain passengers need them. They're built into the fare, they're staffed for. But they're not going to be announced ship-wide, because the moment every passenger asks for everything at once, the logistics fall apart and the cost skyrockets. So they're available only to the passengers who know to ask, and only if those passengers ask early. You don't need all 10. Pick the 2 or 3 that apply to your situation. Write them down before you board. Find your cabin steward within the first hour. Go to guest services on embarkation day. Call the medical center if your medication requires it. Use the words I gave you not as a script, but as a framework. Be specific, be kind, and if they say no, ask if there's an alternative. The thing I've learned after more than 20 years of cruising is this. The passengers who have the best experiences are not always the ones in the most expensive cabins. They're the ones who understand the system and know how to work with it. They don't assume that what's visible is all that's available. They ask, they make requests early, and they sail home having actually used what they paid for. Now, if you're planning a cruise soon, here's what I'd suggest. Before you board, look at this list and circle the 2 or 3 that matter for your situation. Mattress topper, ice delivery, priority tender, medical refrigeration, custom meal service, whatever fits your life, write them down, keep them accessible on embarkation day. The worst that happens is you get a polite no. The best that happens is you sleep through the night, your medication stays safe, you're the 3rd person off the tender instead of the 200th, and you spend the cruise enjoying it instead of managing it. These aren't tricks. They're not loopholes. They're not secret handshakes. They're services that were designed for passengers exactly like us, people who need practical things done well, not just a glossy brochure about ocean views. They're just sitting there, waiting to be asked for. I want to hear from you now. Is there a service you've discovered on a cruise that other people don't seem to know about? Or have you ever asked for something and been turned down in a way that felt unfair? Tell me in the comments. Genuinely, this is the kind of thing our community figures out together, and your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear before their next sailing. Next time, I'm covering the embarkation day timing mistake that gets more seniors stuck in long lines than anything else and the exact window you need to hit to skip most of it. If that sounds useful, subscribe so you don't miss it. If this video helped you, a thumbs up takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps more people find this kind of information. Smooth seas, and I'll see you next time.